Yeah, yeah, sure. Um, look at the Meteor file just since you have it already open. So actually, you want to look at the content? Yeah.
Yeah.
So for link, the way I get it is I can go to meteor.com and there's a tutorial, and you go to the tutorial and say start the tutorial there. And if you scroll down, you'll see that there's a bunch of loaded at the bottom, just links to changes in GitHub. And I click on one of those changes. It takes me to go phone. That's a lot of steps. Right now, what's in the packages folder is the Meteor platform. So it seems pretty slim, right? But with a bunch of packages all put together, crafted in a specific way. So this Meteor platform is a package, just as AutoPubler is a package. We'll be removing those auto-publish and insecure third thing of other packages. It's how the system is built. With package and make your own packages that will replace all those packages. Database all DP worked or something, use some different protocol. That's totally in your purview to be able to do. Okay. Or in that folder, anything? Should be a version release, yeah. If we can actually, maybe we can just cat that. Oh. This is probably right away. When you're using the Meteor platform package, the actual that came from that, right? So that's what from having those three these are those packages. Session, templating, you know, lots of, and for most, you can actually probably even get some ideas from the people who already did the tutorial. Space bars, templating, sort of just, and as if we went and we just did a Meteor list, the same kind of information, but as far as Meteor's concerned, these are the packages that you have and dependencies, but it'll actually sort as versions go. Because okay, so right now it says auto publish version literally with Meteor platform. So and it would actually update to the most recent all those packages. So I don't know. We can actually, it's just going to kill our GitHub thing. Does everybody have the GitHub URL and the project cloned if they want it cloned? Okay, good. Everyone, in effect, did the simple to-dos here, and it should be running. And if it's not running, just let me know, and we can sort of go with it early. Okay, if we go next. Okay, in your, if you simply go to the next check-in, not date, but so there's a Windows version, there's a Mac version. I think it's nice. Yeah, I think it's as good as I can get. And unfortunately, sometimes you want to do something and it's just not in there. At least I haven't found it in there. So things like reverting a merge and that kind of stuff. But you know, that's unusual. So you can see right here of our repo is at Meteor create. We want to go to the next one. Add template backends to so now if we go back or at our to-dos, yeah, okay, awesome. Okay, so here we have our HTML, we have a head, we have a body, and we have a template. You can see that in this unordered list, we have a collection of something, right? They're going to be objects concerned, as far as the templating library is concerned. And objects, it's going to basically create a new content will be passed to this other template call here. So this template task, which is this one, is injected into here for each one of the tasks. The context of data that it has, it's a simple JavaScript object. There's nothing fancy about it. So if we go to the okay, it's an array. And the array have three objects basically with text in them. If we fire that guy up, so and you should see it run. Who wants to have it going? Okay. Please.
It's okay if we ask questions one by one?
Oh yeah, totally.
I was playing around with this. One of the challenges I have with Meteor is lying around the templates and then writing helpers to like get the traversal of the object.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna just look at it. Let me just play with that and see if I can get the template and right from the I tried to put in curly braces task.test.
Mm-hmm.
And that I had no idea to find out why it didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll see that there's a post, on Meteor Talk, there's a statement by David Glasser. I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name. But when you want to run helpers by hand, it's really complicated. The context associated with the helper, right? Really the problem when you try to directly access it, you don't have the appropriate context set up. So, it set up the context for you. But here, the task is an array, right? So, display that array.
For each level of the hierarchy,
for you. And it doesn't necessarily have to have a name. It can be. So what I mean by implied is list, right? And let's say instead of just having a text object or a bigger, deeper property that had its own properties, and maybe you could keep on saying, you know, property name dot property name dot, and it should appropriately be associated, right?
It can. One of the little tricky things here that happens sometimes is that tag referencing that template, and sometimes what happens is when you rush data context without really realizing it, you could simplify this by taking that li and just putting it right up in the each there, right? So that's just broken out for template, but you don't necessarily have to do that. That's just kind of like a code organizer. Sometimes that helps to kind of simplify context, because sometimes you have to pass context.
You can go into here, right?
Oh, could you just show me what?
Referring to this name, right? So we could just put it up here, and that would be the same thing. And sometimes that will simplify things because you may not be getting your data down here because your context may have changed in certain situations. So sometimes it helps to see if it's an issue of, oh, okay, I'm not passing my data to my template opposed to.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, that's very helpful.
So notice too, if you go back to the simple todos.js, right? There's a name associated. So this task template, todos.js, the template body helper, you can see this task is associated with the body, right? It's not template, the task template. So you could have actually, when you want to refer to this, you can say, well, okay, depending upon, so what I'm trying to get at is that I restructure my code and I forget to change this body to whatever the template name is. And then it's like, oh, why am I not getting my data anymore? Well, it's because your helper's not associated with that. And it's so easy to screw up because, well, there's no checking for it. For example, if you actually save that file, that HTML file, so if we go look at so we got to seeing it, so with just going to the side, I guess, all the time, we could see a change. But so maybe revert that change, and then we can. Oh, just in GitHub. Well, maybe this will work too. Yeah. Go to the next slide. So that context thing I was talking about too, though, it's context is as you build levels and levels dependent upon one another, and something that I'm still in the process of figuring out on this. Please let me know. Is when you pass this to a child template, or have to pass this to a child template, because sometimes it seems like you have to. Okay, so we looked at helpers, it's this template, and if we scroll, during tasks via the console. Okay, sure. So the next step, if we go to our check-in, is will take us to basically associating data from a data. So just for people's insight too, this tutorial has changed. If you did it months ago, it's been updated a number of times with different. We can just look at the source. I like just go to the. Yeah, that's a static array, and then yeah. So we just we want to be this one. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So the HTML is the same. And wow, what's that? Somebody's got some serious gas. Okay. So we want to associate data like that. Somebody's getting very excited. All right. So right here, and now we're going to replace it with a task.find. We're going to return a bunch of data from a database, right? Our console, and we're running. We open up the development console for the browser. Well, we can go here. Actually, so associating data. So if we do Meteor Mongo here, so if you open up the database that's associated with your project. So in effect, you have it running. You open up another tab. You and it'll open up your database in a Mongo shell, right? And this is looking at a database file that's in your there. You'll see that it's probably empty. It's like an empty database, right? So here, if you do show collections, you'll see that there's nothing there. Like it's but nothing's happening. Nothing is interesting, and we're expecting, right? So if we go back to yeah, and we open up a console here, a web console. And if we type in tasks with a capital T, I believe, what that is if you just type task and hit enter like Josh just did, you see there's a Mongo collection. It has a bunch of properties already associated with it. A lot of them start with things that they expect that might change. Others don't have underscores because they've been for a while, right? So if you open that up a little bit, actually, a few things in there. So there'll be a find, update, remove, find one, these kinds of things. and it's actually just a classic JavaScript object as well. You know, objects have other sub-objects in them and such, but for all intents and purposes, it's a Meteor or a JavaScript object that extends Mongo collection. Right. Some interesting areas already here too that are like validators, for example, when you want to validate choose packages that might use those facilities, or you might make your own package because you can make a package if you want. Bless you. But you'll notice that there's a name tasks, a connection, and that connection is going to be to on the server side, right? And you'll notice that there's a local like this on the server side. You'd see actually slightly different things. But yeah, I haven't played around very much with that. But we do actually a task.insert. So yeah, .insert and a literal object that just says colon, I don't know, hello world or something. And then actually you want to put a date and a new date. Same object created at. I don't know if it's relevant, but they did a new date. I guess space, yeah, and that's it, yeah. So, yeah. This literal between it because this collection object React, and the collection itself is .find, and then in parentheses and a set of, you know, just and then cursor has thing, sort of idea, limiting. You'll see it returns a cursor. Big, let's say, right? And it'll be on a server because you don't want to show it, right? They have those things, but it doesn't act one transactions in your organism where there's this concept of page faults. It's very common when you is you object that if you look at like an infinite scroll kind of mechanism, right? In effect, it's sort of trying to mimic a infinite scroll, usually unfortunately. It's certainly some of those capabilities that it has. And actually, so there's the Mongo database, and all these different adapters on top. So access points available to you. Say, oh, hey, here's that data that was requested. I'm going to convert it to the appropriate language platform, kind of, and OS 10 in this case as well, right? So when you think platform and how, and then of course, done with it, it's going to propagate it up to the application layer. The application layers. When it needs to be exposed to the application level, they expose via this cursor would dynamically grow upon request. And you know, in reality, it actually may just be an array, but they may have just not got to the point where they said, we're going to provide you a cursor, but they might put it behind the abstraction of a cursor. So like, for example, when you're developing things, right, those partially done things expose something that's functional enough for people at engineer something better. So I would expect that because this is probably a pretty mature project. So Meteor uses that would be So because it's sort of mature, I would say that it's probably pretty good.
One query there was a second to last. Where would you see your data in there?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I don't know. I think that, yeah, probably in there. That's part of the thing that I was saying, that it might just be right? The data, they might flush.
Yeah, I mean, identified it here, right? Like normally in the find, you would put like an ID or something like that, and then you would get data. But I think right now, we're just getting right? Which,
Well, if in here, this is doing saying here, we'll see that it's just giving us data and return it to an array. I think, right, selection or something like that. I've never really poked around very much in there. But okay, so we got some data in the data. What's our next thing on our agenda? But we added went exceptions date time. Oh, console. Access the database itself. And you'll notice it's just slightly different. Like it's object. We're using, what are you going to call it in the Mongo database? So here, if you do selections, there's a bunch of default indexes at this point, right? And we would see that there'd be a new entry there, right? So so next steps. So if you do a db.tasks.find and list of objects, and you'll see actually here there's this ISO date. When no, you do, but this ISO date is actually you'll notice that a specific Mongo thing, and that's being hidden from you in effect when you really normal. So I don't know if it's a big problem or not. I don't necessarily. There's in here, it's just an underscore ID, right? Different. So when you're integrating data and you're making like an ETL process or something, you have your, right? I just basically via two different ways. Let's try again via the user. Go to our next form. So form, you'll see there's a form tag here. It says placeholder. The rest of this HTML stack is exactly the same. Something that's or talk group or Meteor core, I forget which one it is now, because it was a long time ago. But basically, they're saying this form tag, you really don't need it. You know, they put it here because it's good form to have, but it would functions exactly the same without, right? Fallback, that's more elegant. It depends. There's a lot of things that on probably going to be a few modern browsers. Well, there's also conveniences. So things like local storage. We can see that the tasks.find very similar to sort by. I don't know if you guys do what we Mongo actually put in something like a callback or something. And interest, right? What it called it doesn't proceed. This is built on the efficient call that. And I think they're probably right. I don't know. I think it is and features. And for good, for example, I has basically it's work, but anyway, so Meteor doesn't run on io.js, and that's because Fiber isn't supported. Fiber will go. All their synchronization kind of metaphors are based upon that. Okay, so here we'll notice in line 12 we have this template.body.event. That's a new little section. So before we had help that we associate with template. So you can still use your classic jQuery stuff as well, right? Like this is very jQuery-like in regards that you have a selector and then some function gets called, and here in this function you get an event parameter, and there will also be a parameter template that is actively, which is the body template at that time. So the value is clear as to when things are sort of associated. With the JavaScript stuff, you do have to do things like metaphors. So normally when you're just using JavaScript, this approach for events, you would do it in the render call. In previous versions of Meteor, the render call would be called multiple, but you know, since version I think 9.3 maybe, or 8.3, I don't know. Anyway, for a while now, when you're going through the life cycle of the template, the render call only happens once when it's rendered. So okay, what's happening here, just to look at it a little bit more closely, is we have an event parameter, and the thing is that input field, right? Because the new task is based upon that input field, I think. So when we go look at get value, it's sort of pretty straightforward path of objects. So we get the text, and because the enter is from value there, so it would be empty, an empty string, or it'll be inserting it with a new time and resetting the input field and returning false just so it actually doesn't submit. So that's a little bit different than we're probably used to using. Yeah, Thor.
So yeah, I struggled with the value. I get the event target, that's basically the object of the function. So the text, is that just true? Tag. So there's a type equals the type parameter. So that just grabbing what's between the start of the tag and the end of the tag.
Our HTML.
The text of
Yeah, so it's so it's an input field of type text, right? And there's a name tag. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good thing to try. I would never probably do that.
Like you can use like jQuery, you can use JavaScript. Like you're just grabbing that like event and using it through your habit, but sometimes like you want to grab something else on the page. So something common in here is you can do, like I said, grab anything on the page. You can scope based on, so the disk would be the scoping. You don't have to use this way, but this is just like a simplified, you've got that event path. The breakpoint here, and we're to look at that event, and kind of like, there's a bunch of different properties. You can kind of see what being passed in and see what you have access to. What you want isn't there. You can only use jQuery or JavaScript API. Okay.
So you can
Context in that context is the main value of the input field. Event.target is a foreign object. And so we have properties that are based on the main value of the input field.
cool. Okay, good. Thank you. Anything else?
I don't know when Mark wants
Yeah,
to do it.
you can do that right now if you want. It's pretty handy to be able to debug both on the client and on the client. You can see you can always put things like alert statements and console log because you can sort of get a lot of feedback without stopping. well, the alerts you stop, the console logs you don't stop. But so something to consider right now, if we go to sources and we can do Command P if you're using Mac, and then Command O. I think Command O and Command P both work. Simple to-dos.js, and you'll notice this big long string at the end. Every time I create that file, if it changed. If it didn't change, it'll leave it the same, right? Wiped out every time you make that change in that file. So Josh brought up that file, and now if we put in, and I guess here if we type in that add it happened, and you can see it stopped at the breakpoint, right? See that it's actually a jQuery event. Type submit. Has timestamps. What else does it have? It's usually a pretty big event, actually. Well, I find there's lots of stuff in there anyway.
It's the form, and then so we're using target right now. Different things that I'm going to do in this case. Current target and target are the same. You can actually use child node. Use traverse. How do we use target?
So I think you're probably not in target right now, right? So target. So if you look at target 0 and just open that up, and value, I believe, and it might be a name or something. So value new task. So in this case, right, it displays it as an array index, but as some sort of record name will be like a key as well, right? So the key being so if, okay, actually if we go to the and if we scroll down to the bottom and event.target in square braces and a string, we dot value, we get the same thing, right? So in the debug 0, and it's true. It's just like an array of as it actually turns out, you can access it by a key, right? And this key is called, and so the property name is text, and the key is text. So they do this a lot in JavaScript. No, maybe it's unusual, but in effect, object, right? If we just say like var a, an empty object, little object, and right, if you just type in a here, enter, you'll see that's just an object, right? So var a, and so just like an empty object, nothing in it. But if you say a and then put in square braces here. Yeah. Array index, so no space here. So this is just sort of classic JavaScript, right? So in these braces, in like a string value, and that string value will be, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Say Josh equals something. I know the and enter. So if we go type in and enter, you can see now you have an object and there's Josh. It has a value that has something in it. Now, if you did something else, like go back to A and something, you know, like just make a new line. And A dot equals something else. And enter. If you go type A again, what the object is, it'll have two properties. Gosh, and they both have some value. So you can create a property notation, and you can create one using this sort of property notation. So it's pretty simple. It's actually, most of the time, if you use like JS hint or something, they really like this approach of just using properties. So object.property name. But are trying to access things dynamically, creating property names and stuff, you'll find this array notation to be really very handy. And it's just because, yeah, it's unusual. Most of the time you don't need to worry about it, but dynamic setting properties is definitely somewhere. Okay, so.
Just did you see kind of like the whole debug process? That's what we did there. Does anyone have questions on that? Our current JavaScript that we're working on, so that was simple to do. Then I just put a breakpoint on the code we're working on, and then I went to hit the event, and we just break that, right? So now we're just kind of like in that function that we're currently working on.
Does that make sense? Okay. So yeah, that breakpoint would be gone because the fog got wiped out. You know, that's sort of that was lots of things that I really like. So sometimes you just don't get everything you want. But it actually, or it should insert that, and you can see that the server is trying to talk to the client a bunch, and the server is saying, hey, you know, nobody's responding. So you end up getting errors and things like that. Sometimes when you're paused for long periods of time, it's pretty seamless. Okay, so console, database, and now Viv UI. Next steps are all right. Okay, so if we move to your next commit, is this problematic at all? Okay, cool. Okay, so now if we go look at our markup. Yeah, okay. So it's exactly the same. There's just a small difference here in that instead of just having the text being output in a button, we have a text box, and we have an if statement on the list. So you'll notice something that's sort of interesting here is this if checked. And what that's doing is they try to keep the templates as sparse as possible. Like this is logic, definitely, but you know, stuff like that. But when I used it, it was like, oh my God, there's all this code and template stuff. It's like nightmarish, right? They try to keep that isolated. There's always going to be some amount of logic in your UI because, well, UI the approach for that is what React uses. So Facebook uses React logic in their templates, but really they don't really have templates. The templates are very approachable. We're going to stick with these templates for a while because people can grasp. So something to know in this if statement is if this if results in nothing, for example, if checked was false, you will not be in this class. But not only that, it will actually remove that whole they do checked in code themselves. Before it's actually output to your this thing gets converted to basically some extra logic property would just never be put in there if checked was false. Right? How come it's not show up? It could be because you might have the whole value being removed, right? Because there's nothing actually there. That's just a judgment call that they had to make when they were making the space bars compiler. Real problems. But if you did have other classes in here, it would still show the property because, well, there'll always be something in it then, right? Well, this is definitely pre-processing stuff. Bash. If we go look at the todos.js, what do we have as far as Bash code goes? So here. So this. Are you talking about this? Oh, Bash, maybe in that, okay, you're seeing some dollar signs and some, this is Mongo syntax. So, yeah, so anytime you're doing tasks dot, you know, I guess it's actually remove, not delete, and all the fines, you can see syntax sort of like this. In the checked colon bang, that's JavaScript code, right? So you're creating a JavaScript object here, a literal object with a property called checked, inverting what the value of this dot checked is. Okay, and this dot underscore ID is the ID that you're going to use to select a specific task that you're going to update. This is a selector, but it's in Mongo syntax for select syntax. So it's slightly different, well, quite a bit different. You'll notice that, well, I guess we can talk a little bit on that. So you notice this dot underscore ID and this dot checked, right? So you'll notice that, okay, you already know that you're in the area, right? And template, right? And then you say, okay, well, this event's going to handle a click on a dash text. So if we go back to our HTML template, the thing that would be this task template, and the context is set up in here in this each.task. Each loop goes through. Each time it steps through the loop, it's going to set a task template. It's going to be that task. So you'll notice that here you're going to have a property that you're in this dot checked here, and it would have resulted in exactly the same thing, right? Because of the context of this is set up, but because it's inherent, they simply said, oh, we'll just type in checked because it's way easy to read, less typing, that kind of thing, right? Same thing with this here. Okay, so just as I was talking about this if checked here, checked class, the same kind of thing exists here in this input. So if checked is attribute will be wiped out, it'll be nothing as well, right? Just so you know. And yeah, so I guess we can so to delete. So,
when do you know when to use the Mongo syntax? Is it just purely on corrections, or when do you know how to use JavaScript, like objects to evaluate?
Yeah. Okay, so we go look back at our JavaScript. You could have made a variable, like on line above here, called, variable my query. Task.update this underscore ID, comma, my query, that method call off, right? So this is a JavaScript object. And the thing is that JavaScript object, and it's going to do something with it. It's a parameter. Wrapper, like adapter, is concerned, right? So with the database, you need to put things in the form that the database is going to expect. Otherwise, it'll say, oh, I don't know what to do with this. So it is JavaScript, definitely, but it's going to be formed in the appropriate having these methods and things like that it needs to interact with Mongo. $set is a property. So you could in your console, like your web browser console, and you would see that it was, and that property would have a sub object that it would have a property called checked, and this dot checked would probably fail because you probably wouldn't have the object true or false or something. Okay, the other one is a kind of thing as the update call that it passed this dot underscore remove method. Say remove this object with this idea of. So when that's run, obviously, it's run on the client. So this is client-side code. With EDP, that the server says, okay, I'll allow this. It's like no problem. because it has the same IDs as the client does, because they're always sort of trying to. Next slide. Deploy here. This slide. Think of it, but if you guys do Meteor deploy, you'll see if you want. This will just have to have a unique name here, _app_name.meteor.com. They do have accounts now. So originally when the tutorial came out, they didn't have actual accounts. You would just sort of pull a name, and then if you want to delete it, you would like go in and you'd just have to know what the name. Oh, you actually sign up, and you have sort of credentials. Really quite handy. So I'd encourage you guys to try it out at a time, because you have mechanisms to deploy and keep track of different applications. You'll have a dashboard saying, well, where are my credentials being used? And same kind of thing as I guess you get with Google's login. But yeah, it's pretty good. So I think you can just put in as much as you want. That, you know, this is really for sort of testing and sort of prototyping. So you don't want to necessarily expect it to be, but you know, it's probably more reliable than most people's servers. So I wouldn't like worry too much about it in that regard. But there's an option on here. They have the whole Galaxy project. The Galaxy project is building hosting where you can say Meteor deploy, enter deploy, and they'll take care of it for you. Sort of like a Heroku kind of setup, except, hey, we like Heroku, that kind of idea where you have a deploy, you can monitor, you can have a dashboard and such, but people often complain that they don't have access to the actual machine running, and they were suggesting that that was something that they were wanting to. It's generally a good thing. Like when you really want to start tweaking with your environment and stuff, you sort of need a mechanism to do so, and that's where they offer a platform as a service. So. Yeah. So next step, running on mobile. Have any Cordova apps? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Wow. More than I expected. So to me, right, I guess I started playing around with I started playing around with it, and I guess it was called, what's it called now? PhoneGap. Thank you. So yeah, I started playing around with that, and I said, oh, this is really cool, because I was making iPhone apps at the time, and I said, okay, neat. But as browser, well, where does the value come into play? Like, why would I want to make a Cordova app instead of like an HTML5 app on a good browser? And I understand that, okay, I can click on, so like I could say, yeah, launch the app. Other than that, I'm starting to think, well, there's less and less value. But maybe you guys might be able to provide insight as to where you get the value.
The value of Cordova is primarily the right ones to deploy everywhere. You're not going to build, require native level of responsiveness. You're not going to build Flappy Bird or be as responsive as it is native. For the there's
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Did you guys want to go through this? It might be.
I tried, have you guys heard of Telescope?
Yeah.
Okay, so I tried to put Telescope into iOS and it failed terribly. And I also tried to put, I'm wondering, like, who provides kind of porting support?
Good question. So I don't think, so with respect to integration, that's the Meteor team that does that. But with respect to like the Cordova plugins, that's just the Cordova community. Well, if you want to interface with like, or your Compass or things like that, you know, that you do that with a plugin, unless of course you're, yeah, when, I think if you just search for Cordova plugins, you'll see like most of them, well, search results, I don't know, did you look at a list recently?
No, I haven't played with Cordova. Where Cordova? Okay, so Cordova is like, I don't know if I can do that. Native mobile native code, so it's written in JavaScript, and then it basically interfaces with either Android or iOS, so that you would write your app, and then it takes care of talking to the Android device or the iOS device. And it was originally a separate company bought by Adobe, and then I think they open source framework for extracting your mobile code.
Yeah. I think we don't have any Android right now, so maybe just try. There should be a, scroll down, there's iOS. Yeah, if you do a Meteor install iOS. Yeah. Yeah, so you want to probably, yeah.
What was the Meteor install?
Well, it's so handy. Oh, okay. If you want to do this, there's a couple things to think of. Code if you want to do it on iOS, and you need the Android SDK if you want Android. Yeah, so I don't think we'll probably worry about it this time. But you'll need a developer account if you want to deploy it onto your iOS device, right? And if you want to put it on the App Store, of course, you still need a developer account. When it gets originally accepted, hopefully they'll say, well, okay, it has these capabilities currently, and if you redeploy again Meteor, and so we say, Meteor deploy my next version, and it uses a whole bunch, and the App Store people will say, hey, you know, we approved it with this set of features, but now you're deploying it with this other set of features. You know, what they're going to do, if they're going to pull your app off the App Store because they sort of didn't approve. So the recommendation that I heard is more along the lines of libraries and sort of functional components that you think you're going to need, and then, you know, make it look good, or whatever the case may be, but improve it such that you're not using sort of newer capabilities, that kind of idea. So for example, if you're using the accelerometer via the Cordova plugin, then that's change it to something else, then maybe they'll get suspicious. Would you hear anything about the Android store?
So he's referring to, like, Meteor has the ability to hot code push. You can push up changes or processes, like, submit it to Apple, they approve it, and then it goes. So, well, you can actually keep making changes to your app without going through that approval process. You can just push code out.
So the concern of the community is that, so basically it's saying, like, because of Apple's review process, they have said as long as that an update, you're not changing the design and the functionality, then it's okay. So Android doesn't have that same kind of process funnel, so you don't have to worry about that.
Thanks, way more clear. Our next step then. Okay, temporary state. So, okay, so if you go to your next GitHub, you'll see that they start using session. So, I know most people who have developed web applications in the past decade or so have used session. So they have the same kind of concept because it's actually a pretty convenient concept. So so session is a global object, and you can set up some keys in the dictionary, and you can set values on those keys. So the way that you do it, if you want to scroll down maybe to okay, so right here, not suited, and it takes event target checked, right? An event here, and it's going to property which will have this value checked, right? Now, if we scroll up, we'll see that there's areas where it says session.get. Here, there's if session.get hide completed, and here's another session.get here, hide completed. That's being returned from that session.get, and here it's being used in some sort of logical operation. Now, the thing is, you'll never actually see when .set. There's no like, oh, and call the hide completed method. And it's because session is a reactive object. Uses session.get will automatically be if it's in a reactive data context. I gotcha, the whole reactive data context. But we'll talk. But first, just to start off is okay, it's being set to here. This will evaluate that true or false, and here it will output the true or false. To-dos HTML. A new label up here that says hide completed tasks, and it has a property equals hide completed, so it'll be true or false. And anything else? Oh, incomplete count. Thank you. Yeah. So incomplete count will be a count, I guess, of things completed or not. In the browser, Meteor again. So we killed the browser console or the development console at first there. So now just to restart it, and most of the time the browser, if the server process has been down too long, you'll probably have to refresh your browser. You can see that it did just automatically update, which is great. B in parentheses beside it, and there's a checkbox with completed tasks. So we can complete a task, for example, by checking it, and then we can hit that hide completed tasks as you click on that, right? Okay. Let's look at a context kind of thing. Because It's probably one of the most interesting, well, maybe not interesting, but it's one of the most valuable and troublesome areas all at once. So if we go back to our JS file, this reactive data context kind of concept, right? I'm sure you guys all understand property and everything that's listening to it. And that's really sort of what's happening. But how is it happening? Sort of the guy is they have a, when you initially run these template, when you originally start the body, I should say, like when it renders, it'll say, well, the page hasn't even yet rendered. Why is it rendering the helpers? And it's because these helpers need to run. Yeah. So the React Data Context works by running the function. Right. It says, okay, I have a dependency on this session.get. Potentially other functions like this task.find function, right? And after that, these things will automatically be rerun. And one, they have to be functions, and two, they have to be reactive to be run. So if you look at the Meteor docs, what functions are there that can be rerun? What functions are inherently reactive ones? You know, you can always make your own reactive object if you want, or function, I should say, that has reactive functions in it. In looking at this, the code seems sort of simple in regards that we haven't made function calls back and forth, but it's just sort of taking care of that for us, right? Yeah. Yeah. So hide complete the same way as tasks.
So task, yeah, task is a collection. So it, that's just part of a collection, the functionality. Session is kind of like a global variable for you to make other data be reactive, right? So if you just wanted to have like a string that take care of updating other things, session is kind of that global scope. So that's already built in. Because task is a collection, that's all built into this.
So actually we could bring up Meteor docs actually things. But yeah, it's sort of important to keep track of. There's a few, so the thing is, you can make your own, and like a wrapper over the reactive var object. Inherent ones that have reactivity just like built right in, right? They're baked in reactive. Other ones, you know, like you can make your own, make it reactive. And I think hold depths. Oh, maybe it's not depths in here.
Yeah.
Okay. How difficult is it to create your own reactive data source? Not very. So really, there's a few different ways of making it. You can make it libraries that just make them for you, right? Like packages. Then there's of making them such that you use that they call it tracker now. So here in effect, and they talk about like at the base level, you want to create this object that was reactive, right? You would use depend and change. Set and get would wrap these change things. So here, for example, weather, right? Right now it's sunny. The weather depth, it makes, and then there's a get and there's a set, right? So the set would say every time you change weather, and then you'd sort of flag this object as being changed, the dependency object. And the thing that called get weather would rerun this return weather time that you changed it, right? So that's at the lowest level. But you know, that gets really much more involved. Reactive data context is something to be aware of when you're dealing with this kind of thing too, right? Because when you're using something that's reactive, up the context, but in your helpers, there's a context that's already set up for you, right? So the helpers will automatically run when something in them. Whereas if you have something reactive and it's just like in some other block of code, it's just, okay, you changed it and I don't care kind of thing, right? At tracker.autorun, that's basically setting up manually a reactive context, similarly as what you're doing in what makes some sense, hopefully. Created ones, it's way easier. And you have to be aware, one, they're not reactive on the server. Active and reactive data context areas. And reactive by default. And yeah, so it's. Any other questions? I guess we can also just point out this too. Task.that there's a not equals reference and not equal to true, right? So you're creating a new literal object, it has a property and it's set to true. And then here you've changed off of the end, right? So a lot of things are sort of chainable, and that's sort of handy. Other than that, we can see that there's a sort passed in here. Do you want to scroll down maybe to see if there's anything in the event? We need to. Yeah, yeah. So actually, if you go look at .org kind of thing and look at find, it'll give you like copy it and paste it in. Sometimes you do need to restructure. Sometimes it's sort of copy and paste. Notice though that it's only a subsection of all the functionality that Meteor. So there's some pieces of functionality that they don't support. They basically don't do anything. So if you might put in another parameter into your find call, and it'll sort of like, well, check to see if it's supported. But it's just not everything. So I think with skip isn't supported, I think. Anyway, okay, next slide. Okay, adding user accounts. Well, they have a built-in user account system that it's not built in, I guess. All packages, you can add them via Meteor add, and packages. When you use this accounts package, with where in your markup, and in the accounts, you put this somewhere in your client-side code, saying, well, what is it? What kind of parameters do we need to have to set up in our account subsystem, right? So, I think, okay. So once you have an account, users, right? Once you have users, they have, they can have usernames, and they can have other properties too, right? So they'll have a profile stuff, right? So, and also a couple other helpers like current user. What else? Anything interesting? You can override the accounts UI, the actual user object, so you can access properties that hang off the user object. Look at our code. How did that change? Okay, so we have some login buttons that are added. There's an if statement here. If a person's a user, then they can add new tasks. Otherwise, they can't add new tasks. So some pretty simple logic. And we also put user in the JS file. We really just augment the key and username. You'll notice this kind of thing, username, is it's sort of commonly done in non-SQL kind of databases that you expect big loads. Name, you know, it's a decision whether you always go look it up or whether you just embed it in your object. Because if you embed it in your object, person changes their username, well, you got to change all the objects they own. Consideration. So sort of a trade-off. Okay. The accounts configuration. Notice this whole file is side functionality. It's all client-side functionality, right? So I think we scroll to the very top. Client, right? So all this is just client-side code, runs the browser as far as it's concerned, except for that task equals new Mongo collection. That's the only piece of code that's there. So I go to our next checkout. Okay. So here we remove the insecure package. So we're going to be less insecure. And I think if we scroll down, there's a, oh, I thought there was a call to subscribe or something. Okay. I guess that's right at the bottom then. So the template has methods is sort of what that is a mechanism by that the client can call server-side code. But really, these Meteor methods aren't just on the server side; they're on the client-side code as well. You notice that they're outside of the is client block. So basically, what that's doing is they exist both in the client and the server. And when you do a Meteor call, it's going to call the client side. If you're calling a Meteor call on the client side, it's going to call the client side first. It'll execute it, and then it'll call the server-side code and execute that as well, right? you sort of say, well, isn't that sort of redundant? And it sort of is. But what the value is on the server side, when you do Meteor user ID here, you actually are assured that it's the user in comparison to somebody that's just sort of making up a Meteor.user ID object and having it return some value because you want, right? So on the server, well, they can't change the code, so you can actually put real checks in there to check your data. Task, there's a delete task, and there's a set check. That's as we already had on the client side, but they're just wrapped now in these other functions. And you'll notice that there should be a call to Meteor call, probably a little bit higher up, that calls this functionality. So Meteor call, the name of the Meteor, and the parameters it takes, right? Now, if the client does a Meteor call like this, inserts data into the database, and then it goes to the server runs that same code and puts something, says, oh, I'm not going to allow it to go to the database. What it's going to do is it's going to revert the data on the client side back to what it was before that insert happened, right? And, you know, it's great in regards to it had a security check, but the problem part is, well, how do I inform my user that something has happened, right? And in effect, you sort of have to do it out of band because you're not told when something is removed. You have to simply say, oh, okay, and what am I going to do, right? So the next step in that, obviously, is to sort of say, okay, well, how do I notify my user that their insert failed, right? And I think you can either simply insert it on the client side and have it fail if it's like a validation error, or the error, you know, your client-side database can't really check, right? Or if it's can't really check. So, you know, you need to have these checks on the server side, basically. There's just no safe domain to check it. So you can actually add so if we go to our next slide. Okay, so insecure, if we scroll down, I think there's going to be, yeah, I guess so. Okay, so yeah, next step. Okay, so removing auto-publish, basically what that does is you don't necessarily want to publish the entire database, you just want to publish a small snapshot of it, right? What am I going to publish to my client? So if we look at our source code, they'll know of the function, yeah. So we have an isServer block, and in here we have a Meteor publish, right? It says, okay, choose task where the current user is the owner, or that it's not private, right? So you can see everybody's tasks that aren't private, and you can see your own tasks. And if we scroll up to the top, we'll see that there is a Meteor subscribe. And on line 5 here, Meteor subscribe tasks, right? So on the client, first thing it does, it's going to subscribe to that publish, basically. And publish will start returning some data. It'll return. And so if we had two tabs open with 2 different users, you can now sort of switch back and forth. And see, you have a sign-in area because we added login buttons. So all these are private right now, or public right now, I should say. So if you sign in, create an account, I guess. And I thought, yeah. So now you can see by default they're public. The other ones don't have that property, right? So they can't be public or private just because they don't have public or private property. So if you click that button beside the public button, private, and if we open up a new other or something, because you'll still be logged in as Josh here. We just, yeah, if you log out, I think you'll be logged out by both. Yeah. Yeah. So you can see that, yeah, it won't show the private ones. Okay.
Question: does everyone understand the publish subscribe metaphor that Meteor uses? Right. Yeah, that step there was just going from that first stage and your demo apps that always have or anything out of it just demoing. It just pushes everything up to the client. So that we remove the auto publish there, and now we get to choose with those publish subscribe what the client gets.
Well, actually, let's go look back at the versions file again, because I think here. So now, if we go look in here, we should see that the auto publish and insecure aren't going to be there, and we'll also have these account packages with all their version numbers and things like that, right? And then if we go back to our console and just do a Meteor update, see if it runs after we update. Yeah. So this Meteor update call, we saw before that there was old versions, and here you can see it'll give you a whole listing of what gets updated. And obviously you could go back to that version file and change it. I guess they just let the application do what it's supposed to do. And then working at that level, so you can roll it back and such. But Meteor, and let's see if the app is still running like we expect. Excellent questions? Yeah?
And so how comfortable are you with the actual security methods behind it? I mean, a hash or encoded identifying the session?
So anything that's on the browser really is suspect, right? Like can change that value at any point in time, like manually. Whether it's via a Meteor app or whether it's like any other kind of web app from the client, it still has to be checked, right? So it's sort of no different in some way, right? People have, but you know, when you post data, you could post anything you wanted.
So the communication between the client and the server, the client is never getting a cursor of private information or information that's public.
Well, that depends upon you, right? As the developer saying, yeah, this is what data I want to publish up. You decide that as the developer. Say, okay, let's publish tasks where there's, you know, where it's not private and the owner is something. But you could put anything in there. publish the users associated with that task, and you consulted and such. But you know, you could publish that if you wanted. It might not track it, I guess, but I don't know. But yeah, it's even more so on a NoSQL database because fit the appropriate shape of the tables it's going into, it's just going to fail. Or if the ORM system that you're interfacing with, like Entity Framework or something, I don't know what that is. It's garbage, right? Whereas in a NoSQL database property, it'll insert that property if you don't tell it not to. It could be like a movie file or whatever, like they can be massive. So you really have to be sort of judicious. The flexibility of having all sorts of weirdly shaped stuff, which is great in regards that fields, you know, SQL Server does the same kind of thing with sparse data tables. Better not being used. I'm thinking I've been talking too long, and I think there's some food or something. I don't know where Yaniv is, but okay, sticking food up. So as far as the sort of like tutorial part, I was thinking I should probably try to wrap things up unless you guys had some specific questions or something. Yeah. Yeah, I think, okay, so on, right, is right now when we debug, they can both the client from the server side, you can make HTTP requests to them, the rest of their data, and potentially that's another thing that now you're shipping their data as well as your data. You know, so there's lots of decisions that you have to make. Do I want the client to go get the data independently of the server? and maybe join that back to the server from the client, or how do I want to deal with that, right? And of course, so there's lots there, lots to think. Yeah. Okay. So so DDP is a very that is used for keeping the client and server. So I think it's called like dynamic data protocol or that. But in effect, there's a DDP proxy analyzer, DDP analyzer. That it's an NPM package that you can download and try to from the client to the server, and it's super handy for debugging the server and or the DDP analyzer package.
No.
Okay. But that's what DDP is, and you want to talk about Redis, right? So I think there's an adapter for Redis, but I don't necessarily know if it's a DDP adapter for Redis for it, but I don't know exactly how it interfaces. So that would be something to sort of research a little bit.
DDP is what Meteor uses to communicate with its backend. So regardless of which status where you're using DDP as part of calling it to communicate.
Well, yeah, that is how they communicate. But it's really right now it's very MongoDB focused kind of thing.
Of course.
But what it is the DDP analyzer. You'll see there's like requests being made to the client, to the server, and then I see a bunch of responses come back, and those responses all go into your. And as far as Redis goes, it would be interesting to know client interfaced with Redis. So I would think. No, but you may do it via a Mongo collection. Like I don't know.
The core community, the core team is basically that they're supporting Mongo right now. But there are like community projects for a lot of that stuff. But like, so you can see here they have like iOS. There's another one I saw the other day, which is like your iOS, which also does. And then I have seen them talk about Redis before, but like I've never. So it's one of those things that you could look up. There's probably a couple different people trying to figure that stuff out.
I know that there's a equal support in, right? And obviously for that would be really valuable because Mongo is really not really that transaction processing credit cards and stuff like that. Well, yeah, you want to make sure that if you put something in there and if you take something out that it's actually.
Yeah, and the core team, a lot of what they say is like the challenge is the way Meteor works is like with MongoDB, they have off-log tailing. So they're basically watching the off-log. They're seeing it every. Well, they used to, and then they switch to the off-log tailing method in or something like that.
Yeah.
It's basically like you have a log. It's the data. There's a log that's doing everything it's doing, and they're watching that, right? As opposed to you actually get to do database.
Yeah, so it's far more efficient, right? And log support on your Mongo database, it will use the polling again. It'll fall back to polling. But if you enable the off-log, then it'll work. So I remember when we first started, we were using Modulus IO, and they didn't have op logs for it at that time, and then they added it, but you just have to pay a premium charge for it, that kind of thing. If you're using something like Amazon, you would set that up yourself. We're using Compose.io, and they have it as long as you're paying for their Mongo support. But yeah, it's pretty good. And it's much faster than 10 seconds thing too, right? It's pretty instant. Now, I don't think it's pushed sharding yet, is one of the concerns. So if you have like really big data and you're going to be sharding it out, then it's not yet there. Now you want to limit it to 2 gigabytes, I think, in size or something along that realm. You'd have to look it up. Anybody else? Thor?
Yeah, I'm a little confused about what happens when you update something on the client and the server fails to update the corresponding records, I guess, in the database.
Yeah.
I just wonder if you could give a little, like maybe, it seems to me that's so important to the reactivity. Like, are we talking about big delays there, or it's like the user could be on a new page?
Yeah. So, but there's a couple things to watch out for too, right? So first, update something on the client and have that propagate to the server in the client, because, so for example, if I bring client, I show it on my screen, and then maybe I route to some other page for delete, I might not have that task still on the client when I route there, and then I say update it, and it's going to say, oh, I updated based upon this ID, but there was nothing would have happened on the server. So there's that gotcha. But the scenario, I did an update on the client, it propagated to the server refused to do the update, failed, and then what, right? You can add back on it, so it will check, for example, right? Your validation though really should be done on the client, but you're gonna have to redo it on the server. Because that's sort of the unfortunate part about the web in some ways, right? Just have to do double work. Luckily enough, the work that you do on the client is done on the client. You don't sort of have to pay the processing load for it or anything. You just a few milliseconds and it validated. On the server side, the load for it, and there might be other business rules too that you check to say, well, make sure this person doesn't add 2 tasks in or something, right? Because their account doesn't allow it or something. So when you do that kind of thing, then you reject the insert or the update, then that would be the thing that would save you to say, oh, you're over your limit. Web application development, though, is prevent them from being able to insert or update when they're not able to do so, sort of approach. But sometimes it's just stupendously expensive to do that, and then you sort of say, well, okay, I have to handle the other approach.
So if you had a task that's available to multiple users, both managing them, how does the server handle or any?
Yeah, so if you want to lock it, you'd have to write it yourself. Right now they have first come wins kind of thing.
There's no queue.
Not beyond what the database and the Mongo adapter queues itself, right? Which is, normal. Like even if you're using a SQL Server database, yeah, same pop. But you can have race conditions as well, right? Where, part of your number might be something from another. That's probably the kind of scenario that you really want to pay attention to. So when that happens, you probably want to consider moving to Mongo 2.6, I guess, and that's where they have a lot more ACID compliant kind of. But right now, I think that they're not really there, and that's why you don't use it for banking and things. You could make obviously a call out to another thing, by the way, if that's something that you really want to do. You're basically just wrapping another database, an ACID database. But yeah, some tricky things. Alrighty. So, team building probably.
Yeah, I guess, should we, in the meantime, alright, I guess pair off with each other. If you're talking. They want to work right out.